The dust that kicked up from the stagecoach wheels settled on Lydia Nelson's black traveling dress like a shroud, marking her arrival in Kingman, Arizona territory, with all the subtlety of a scarlet letter painted across her chest. It was late September 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small desert town as Lydia stepped onto the wooden platform with nothing but a worn carpet bag and the weight of her past. She was 23 years old, though her eyes held the weariness of someone much older. The other passengers gave her a wide berth as they collected their luggage, and she noticed the way the station master's gaze lingered on her before he quickly looked away, his mouth pressed into a thin line of disapproval. She had hoped that traveling this far west would give her a fresh start, that perhaps the frontier would be more forgiving than the rigid society of St. Louis. But she could already see the whispers beginning as two women in their Sunday best paused on the opposite side of the dusty street, their fans rising to shield their mouths as they spoke in urgent, hushed tones. Word traveled faster than any telegraph. Someone on that stagecoach must have recognized her, or perhaps her reputation had simply preceded her like a shadow she could never outrun. Either way, Lydia knew that look, that particular mixture of curiosity and condemnation that decent folk reserved for women like her. Women who had worked in saloons, women who had done what they needed to survive. The boarding house where she had arranged lodging sight unseen stood 3 buildings down, a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a hand-painted sign that read, Mrs. Dorothy Clemens, Rooms for Rent. Lydia straightened her shoulders and began walking, her boots clicking against the wooden boardwalk. She would not let them see her falter. Before she could reach her destination, a portly woman in a severe gray dress emerged from the boarding house entrance. Mrs. Clemens, Lydia presumed. The landlady's expression was as unwelcoming as a rattlesnake's warning. Miss Nelson, I presume. The woman's voice carried across the distance between them. Yes, madam. I wrote to you about the room. You said it was available. That was before I learned certain facts about your character. Mrs. Clemens crossed her arms over her ample bosom. I run a respectable establishment. I cannot have someone of your background under my roof. What would my other tenants think? What would the pastor say? The words struck Lydia like physical blows, but she kept her voice steady. I can pay 3 months in advance, cash money. I do not need your money that badly. The older woman's face was flushed with righteous indignation. There is a camp outside of town where the railroad workers stay. Perhaps you would find more suitable accommodations there. Several townspeople had stopped to watch the exchange, forming a small audience to Lydia's humiliation. She felt her cheeks burning, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Instead, she nodded once, turned on her heel, and walked back the way she had come. The general store stood on the corner, and Lydia decided that at the very least, she needed to purchase some supplies before figuring out where she would spend the night. The moment she entered, however, the shopkeeper, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, looked up from his ledger and his face immediately hardened. We do not serve your kind here, he said flatly. I only need some basic provisions. Bread, cheese, perhaps some dried meat. Did you not hear me? Get out of my store. Lydia's hands trembled as she clutched her carpet bag tighter. Please, I have not eaten since this morning. That is not my concern. Leave, or I will fetch the marshal. Back on the street, Lydia felt the full weight of her situation pressing down on her. She had spent nearly all her savings on the stagecoach ticket west, hoping for a new beginning. Now she found herself in a strange town where no one would rent her a room or sell her food. The sun would set in a few hours, and the desert night could be brutally cold. She walked aimlessly, avoiding the stares and whispers, until she found herself at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to scrubland and rocky outcroppings. There was a small church there, its white steeple reaching toward the cloudless sky. Perhaps the minister would show more Christian charity than his flock. Inside, the church was blessedly cool and dim. Lydia sat in the last pew, finally allowing herself a moment of weakness. Her shoulders sagged and she pressed her face into her hands, fighting back the tears that threatened to overwhelm her. "Are you in need of prayer, my child?" Lydia looked up to find an elderly man in clerical robes approaching down the center aisle. His face was kind, his eyes gentle behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I am in need of many things, Father," she replied honestly. He sat down beside her, his joints creaking with age. "I am Reverend Phillips. I do not believe I have seen you before. I just arrived today. My name is Lydia Nelson." Recognition flickered across his weathered features, and Lydia's heart sank. Even the minister had heard of her. "I see," he said slowly. "I imagine you have already discovered that Kingman can be an unforgiving place for those with complicated pasts. I worked in a saloon in St. Louis," Lydia said, deciding that honesty was her only option at this point. "I did what I had to do to survive after my father died and left me with nothing but debts. But I never stole from anyone. I never hurt anyone. I just want a chance to start over, to live a decent life." "Is that too much to ask?" Reverend Phillips was quiet for a long moment. "Our Lord taught us to forgive, to show mercy to the least among us. But I am afraid that my congregation does not always practice what they preach. They are frightened people, clinging to their respectability as though it were a shield against the harsh realities of this territory. So you are telling me I should leave? I am telling you that the road ahead will not be easy if you stay." He paused, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a few coins. "Take this. It is not much, but it should buy you a meal and perhaps a night in a safe place. There is a ranch about 5 miles north of here, the Diamond D Ranch. The owner, Robert Dalton, sometimes hires workers for odd jobs. He is a fair man, not given to judging others. If you are truly looking for honest work, he might be willing to help you." Lydia took the coins with trembling hands. "Thank you, Reverend. You have shown me more kindness in 5 minutes than this entire town has all day. Go with God, Miss Nelson. And remember, your past does not have to define your future." Those words echoed in Lydia's mind as she left the church and began the long walk north. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. She had no horse, no wagon, just her own 2 feet and a stubborn determination not to give up. The road was rough, little more than a dirt track cutting through sagebrush and scattered Joshua trees. Her feet ached in her city boots, not made for such terrain, and her mouth grew dry as dust. But she kept walking, driven by the faint hope that this Robert Dalton might prove to be the fair man the Reverend had described. After what felt like hours, she crested a small rise and saw the ranch spread out in the valley below. It was a substantial operation with a large main house built of adobe and timber, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals where horses milled about. The land stretched as far as she could see, bounded by distant purple mountains. As she approached the main house, a figure emerged from one of the barns. Even from a distance, Lydia could tell he was tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. He wore the practical attire of a working rancher: worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, scuffed leather boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the setting sun. "Help you?" he called out as she drew closer. Lydia stopped a respectful distance away, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after her long walk. "I am looking for Robert Dalton. You found him." He pushed his hat back, and Lydia got her first clear look at his face. He was perhaps 28 or 29, with sun-bronzed skin, strong features, and striking gray eyes that regarded her with curiosity rather than judgment. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "You are a long way from town on foot, miss. Everything all right?" Reverend Phillips suggested I might find work here. "My name is Lydia Nelson." Robert's expression did not change at the mention of her name, which suggested he had not yet heard the gossip. "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Anything honest. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, keep accounts. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Dalton. I just need a chance." He studied her for a long moment, and Lydia forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. She had nothing left to lose by being honest. "My housekeeper left last month to move to California with her daughter," Robert said finally. "Place has been in sorry shape since then. I have been eating my own cooking, which even my horses would not touch. Can you start tomorrow?" Relief flooded through Lydia so powerfully that she swayed on her feet. Robert moved quickly, catching her elbow to steady her. "When did you last eat?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "This morning before I left the last station." "Come on then. We will get some food in you and you can have the housekeeper's cottage. It is small but clean." He kept his hand on her elbow, guiding her toward the main house. "You look dead on your feet. How far did you walk from town?" "5 miles. In this heat. Woman, you could have died out there." "I had nowhere else to go," Lydia said simply. Robert gave her a sharp look but did not press for details. Instead, he led her into the house, which was indeed in need of a woman's touch. Dirty dishes were piled in the kitchen, dust covered most surfaces, and the whole place had the neglected air of a bachelor's dwelling. "Sit," he ordered, pulling out a chair at the large wooden table. "I will heat up some stew. It is from yesterday, but it is still good." Lydia sat gratefully, watching as this stranger moved about the kitchen with surprising competence. He stoked the fire in the stove, hung a pot over the flame, and sliced thick pieces of bread from a somewhat stale loaf. "So what brings you to Kingman?" he asked as he worked. Here it was, the moment of truth. Lydia could lie, try to hide her past a little longer, but something about Robert Dalton's straightforward manner made her want to be honest. "I was hoping for a fresh start. I worked in a saloon in St. Louis. When my employer died, I used my savings to come west. But it seems my reputation traveled faster than the stagecoach." Robert's hands paused for just a moment before continuing to ladle stew into a bowl. "I see. And the good folks of Kingman made you feel unwelcome." "That is putting it mildly. The landlady refused to rent me a room. The shopkeeper would not sell me food. I imagine by tomorrow the whole county will know that a fallen woman dared to show her face in their respectable town." Robert set the bowl in front of her along with a spoon and the bread. "Eat first. We can talk after." The stew was delicious, rich with beef and vegetables, and Lydia had to force herself not to wolf it down like a starving animal. Robert sat across from her with his own bowl, eating in comfortable silence. When she finally pushed her empty bowl away, feeling more human than she had all day, Robert leaned back in his chair and regarded her thoughtfully. "I do not give a damn what you did in St. Louis," he said bluntly. "Out here, what matters is what you do now. You want honest work, I am offering it. The job pays $25 a month plus room and board. You keep the house clean, do the cooking, and help with the accounts if you are good with numbers. In exchange, you get the cottage, 3 meals a day, and the respect you deserve as a member of my household. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. Do we have an understanding?" Lydia felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes for the second time that day, but these were different. These were tears of relief and gratitude. "Yes, Mr. Dalton, we have an understanding. Call me Robert. Mr. Dalton was my father, and he has been dead these 5 years. He stood and picked up a lantern from the counter. Come on, I will show you the cottage before it gets full dark. The housekeeper's cottage was indeed small, just a single room with a bed, a washstand, a chest of drawers, and a small stove for heat. But to Lydia, it looked like a palace. It was clean, private, and most importantly, it was hers. There are linens in the chest, Robert said from the doorway. Breakfast is usually around dawn. I will be in the main house. Robert, Lydia called as he turned to leave. He looked back at her, his face cast in shadows and lantern light. Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. His expression softened. Everyone deserves a second chance, Lydia. Get some rest. Tomorrow is a new day. After he left, Lydia sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry, but they were healing tears. For the first time since her father's death 3 years ago, she felt a flicker of hope for the future. True to her word, Lydia was up before dawn the next morning, lighting the stove in the main house and starting breakfast. She found eggs in the cold cellar, along with bacon, and she made biscuits from scratch, using the supplies in the pantry. By the time Robert emerged from his bedroom, the kitchen smelled like a proper home. Good Lord, he said, stopping in the doorway to stare at the laden table. Is that coffee I smell? Sit down before it gets cold, Lydia replied, pouring him a cup of the strong, hot brew. Robert sat and immediately dug in with the enthusiasm of a man who had been living on his own poor cooking for too long. This is incredible. Where did you learn to cook like this? My mother taught me before she died. Then I did all the cooking at the saloon. Lydia poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. The owner, Mr. Jameson, said I made the best biscuits in St. Louis. He was not wrong. Robert finished one biscuit and reached for another. If you cook like this every day, I might have to raise your pay just to keep you from getting offers from other ranches. Lydia smiled, the expression feeling strange on her face after yesterday's ordeal. I think I will stay right here if it is all the same to you. After breakfast, Robert gave her a proper tour of the house and explained what needed to be done. The list was extensive but not overwhelming, and Lydia found herself looking forward to bringing order to the chaos. Robert left to work with his horses, and Lydia rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She started with the kitchen, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed. Then she moved on to the rest of the house, dusting, sweeping, and airing out rooms that smelled of disuse. She found Robert's office in a state of complete disarray, with papers scattered everywhere and account books that had not been properly maintained in months. By the time Robert came in for the midday meal, the transformation was already noticeable. He stood in the parlor, looking around with an expression of amazement. I had forgotten the house could look like this, he admitted. My mother would be pleased. She does not live here, Lydia asked, setting out cold meat, cheese, and fresh bread for their lunch. She died when I was 16. My father raised me alone until he passed 5 years ago. It has just been me since then. Robert washed his hands at the kitchen pump and sat down at the now spotless table. I have a few ranch hands who work for me, but they live in the bunkhouse. Good men, but they keep to themselves mostly. Do you raise cattle? Some, but mostly I breed horses. It is what my father did and what his father did before him. We have some of the best working horses in the territory. Pride was evident in his voice. People come from all over to buy Diamond D horses. As they ate, Lydia found herself relaxing in Robert's presence. He was easy to talk to, asking her questions about her life without prying into the painful details. He told her about the ranch, about the challenges of running a business in such an unforgiving landscape, about his hopes of expanding the operation. The afternoon passed quickly as Lydia continued her work. She was in the midst of organizing Robert's office when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw 3 men riding up to the house. They were dressed in town clothes rather than ranch attire, and their faces were not friendly. Robert emerged from the barn and walked out to meet them. Lydia could not hear what was being said, but the conversation was clearly tense. One of the men, portly with a silver watch chain stretched across his vest, was gesturing emphatically. Robert's stance was rigid, his arms crossed over his chest. Finally, Robert said something that made all 3 men stiffen. Then he turned his back on them and walked toward the house. The visitors sat on their horses for a moment longer before wheeling around and riding away. Robert came through the door looking thunderous. "I apologize for that," he said to Lydia. "Town busybodies think they have a say in how I run my ranch. They came about me. It was not a question." "They did." Robert poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher on the table, his movements sharp with anger. "Horace Whitman, who owns the general store, along with 2 of the town council members. They wanted to inform me that I had hired a woman of questionable character and that my association with you could damage my business relationships." Lydia felt her stomach drop. "Robert, I do not want to cause problems for you. If this will hurt your ranch, I can leave." "The hell you will." Robert's eyes flashed. "I told them in no uncertain terms that who I hire is my business alone, and if they have a problem with it, they can take their patronage elsewhere. There are plenty of other ranchers who will be happy to have my horses. But your reputation, my reputation, will survive. Besides, those hypocrites have no room to talk." Whitman waters down his whiskey and shorts his customers on weight. "Councilman Peters has been skimming from the town treasury for years. And James Morton's family made their fortune running slaves before the war. They want to lecture me about morality." Despite herself, Lydia felt a small smile tugging at her lips. "You did not actually say all that to them." "I said enough." Robert's anger was fading, replaced by a wry amusement. "The look on Whitman's face when I told him to get off my property was worth whatever trouble this might cause." "You are either very brave or very foolish, probably a bit of both." He studied her face. "You are not going to run off because some small-minded townfolk got their feathers ruffled, are you? Not if you still want me here." "I still want you here. Now, what were you working on?" "Your accounts. They are a mess, Robert. You have been underpaid on at least 3 horse sales in the last 2 months." Robert groaned. "Numbers have never been my strong suit. That is why the office looks like a tornado went through it." "Well, it will be organized by the end of the week," Lydia promised. "And I will make sure you are not getting cheated." Over the following days, Lydia settled into a comfortable routine. She rose before dawn, prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, managed the accounts, and cooked meals that had Robert praising her skills at every opportunity. In return, Robert treated her with unfailing respect and courtesy, never once making her feel like anything less than a valued member of his household. But the town of Kingman had not forgotten about her. On her first trip into town to purchase supplies, accompanied by Robert at his insistence, she felt the weight of disapproving stares. Women pulled their children closer as she passed. Men tipped their hats to Robert but ignored her completely. Robert, for his part, seemed oblivious to the snubs. He walked beside her with his head high, greeting everyone with his usual friendliness whether they responded or not. At the general store, Horace Whitman reluctantly served them, though he addressed all his comments to Robert and refused to look at Lydia. "Your money is as green as anyone else's," Robert said loudly when Whitman tried to overcharge them. "And I expect the same fair treatment as any other customer." "Of course, Mr. Dalton," Whitman replied stiffly, adjusting the price. As they loaded their purchases into Robert's wagon, A young woman approached hesitantly. She was perhaps 19 or 20, with dark hair and nervous brown eyes. "Excuse me, Miss Nelson," she said quietly, glancing around as if afraid someone would see her talking to Lydia. "Yes. I am Sarah Mitchell. I just wanted to say that I think what people are doing to you is wrong. My father runs the livery stable, and he always taught me to judge people by their actions, not their history." She spoke quickly, as though afraid she would lose her courage. "I wanted you to know that not everyone in town feels the way the Whitmans and the council members do." Lydia felt a rush of warmth toward this young woman. "Thank you, Sarah. That means more to me than you know. If you ever need a friend, you can find me at the livery most days. I help my father with the books." After Sarah hurried away, Robert gave Lydia a meaningful look. "See, not everyone is a judgmental fool. One kind person out of a town of hundreds is not exactly overwhelming support." "It is a start," Robert replied. "Rome was not built in a day, and neither is a good reputation." As September turned into October, Lydia found herself genuinely happy for the first time in years. The work was hard but satisfying, and Robert was an ideal employer. He never demanded anything of her beyond her agreed-upon duties, always spoke to her with respect, and had a dry sense of humor that often made her laugh. She also found herself noticing things about him that had nothing to do with work. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The strength in his hands as he worked with the horses. The patience he showed with the animals in his care. The sound of his voice when he sang to himself while doing morning chores, thinking no one could hear him. These were dangerous thoughts, she reminded herself. Robert had given her a job and a safe place to live. He had defended her against the town's prejudice. But that did not mean he saw her as anything more than an employee. A man like him, a respected rancher with a successful business, would eventually want to marry a proper woman from a good family. Not a former saloon girl with a stained reputation. Still, she could not stop her heart from lifting every time he walked into a room. Could not prevent the flutter in her chest when their hands accidentally brushed. Could not ignore the way his presence made her feel safe and valued in a way she had never experienced before. One evening in late October, Lydia was preparing supper when Robert came in from a long day of working with a particularly stubborn horse. He looked exhausted, his shirt dusty and his hair disheveled. "That mare is going to be the death of me," he announced, collapsing into a chair at the kitchen table. "She has more opinions than a town council and the attitude to back them up." Lydia could not help but laugh. "Should I set a place for her at dinner? She sounds like she has earned it. Do not encourage her. She already thinks she runs this ranch." Robert accepted the glass of cool water she handed him gratefully. "How was your day?" "Productive. I finished the inventory of the tack room, and I found another discrepancy in last month's feed order. Someone has definitely been shorting your deliveries." Robert's expression darkened. "That is the third time this month. I am going to have words with the feed supplier." "I already took care of it. I sent a strongly worded letter explaining that we expect full deliveries at the agreed-upon price, or we will be taking our business to the supplier in Prescott." "What did they say?" "They sent a reply this afternoon with a full refund for the shortages and a promise of better service." Lydia could not keep the note of satisfaction out of her voice. "I believe we have an understanding." Robert stared at her for a moment, then threw back his head and laughed. "You are amazing, you know that. I have been trying to deal with those thieves for months, and you sorted it out in one day." Lydia felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "It is just business. Someone has to protect your interests." "Well, I am damn glad that someone is you." His smile faded into something more serious. "I mean that, Lydia. I do not know what I did before you came here. You have not just made my house a home again, you have made my whole life run smoother. I am grateful for you." The way he was looking at her made Lydia's breath catch. There was something in his eyes, a warmth that went beyond employer and employee, beyond simple gratitude. But before she could analyze it further, Robert stood abruptly. "I should wash up before dinner. Something smells incredible. Roast chicken with vegetables. It will be ready in 20 minutes. After he left the kitchen, Lydia pressed a hand to her racing heart. She was being foolish, reading things into his words and looks that were not there. Robert was a kind man, nothing more. She needed to get control of her feelings before she did something to jeopardize the best situation she had ever had. But controlling her feelings proved easier said than done. As the weeks passed and autumn deepened into the cooler days of November, Lydia found herself falling deeper into love with Robert Dalton. She loved his integrity, the way he treated everyone from his ranch hands to the animals with respect. She loved his humor, his intelligence, his strength tempered with gentleness. She loved the way he looked at her sometimes as though she was something precious. The problem was, she had no idea if he felt the same way. Robert never crossed any lines of propriety. He never made inappropriate comments or gestures. He was the perfect gentleman, which was wonderful in every way except that it left her completely uncertain about his feelings. The situation came to a head one Saturday evening in mid-November. Robert had gone into town for supplies, and Lydia was finishing up the dinner preparations when she heard raised voices outside. She looked out the window to see Robert's wagon returning, but he was not alone. A group of riders surrounded him, and even from a distance, she could tell the situation was tense. Lydia hurried outside, arriving just as Robert climbed down from the wagon seat, positioning himself between the riders and the house. "I have told you already, Councilman Peters. This is my property and who I employ is my business. You are harboring an immoral woman," Peters declared, his face red with indignation. "It is a scandal and a shame. We represent the decent people of Kingman, and we demand that you send her away." "Then the decent people of Kingman can go to hell," Robert replied flatly. "How dare you speak to us that way? We could make things very difficult for you, Dalton. We control the town contracts. We control access to the railroad. One word from us and your business could dry up overnight." "Then say your word. I am not afraid of you." Lydia felt her heart breaking as she listened. Robert was risking everything for her, his business, his reputation, his standing in the community. She could not let him do this. "Stop," she called out, stepping forward. "Please, all of you, just stop." Robert turned to her, his expression alarmed. "Lydia, go back inside. This does not concern you. It concerns me more than anyone." She faced the mounted men with her chin held high. "I will leave. I will pack my things tonight and be gone by morning. I do not want to cause Mr. Dalton any more trouble." "No," Robert said firmly. "You are not going anywhere. Be reasonable, Robert. They can destroy everything you have built." "I do not care." The words burst out of him with surprising force. "Do you not understand? I do not give a damn about contracts or business relationships or what these hypocrites think. You matter more to me than any of that." The world seemed to stop turning. Lydia stared at Robert, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. "I am in love with you, Lydia," Robert continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I have been falling in love with you since the day you walked onto this ranch looking like you had wrestled the desert and barely won. You are smart and strong and brave, and you make every day better just by being in it. So no, I will not let you leave, not because of these small-minded fools and their threats." Councilman Peters sputtered in outrage. "This is an outrage. You would choose a saloon whore over your own kind." Robert's fist connected with Peters's jaw before anyone could react. sending the councilman tumbling from his saddle into the dirt. The other riders' horses shied and pranced nervously. "If any of you ever speak about her that way again, I will do far worse than knock you off your horse," Robert said, his voice deadly calm. "Lydia Nelson is a good woman who has worked hard for everything she has. She deserves respect, and by God, she is going to get it. Now get off my property before I forget I am a gentleman." The riders, helping a dazed Peters back into his saddle, wasted no time in leaving. As the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, Robert turned to Lydia. His hand was already swelling where he had hit Peters. "We should get some ice on that," Lydia said, her voice shaking. "Hang the ice. Did you hear what I said? You said you were in love with me." "I did. I am." He took a step closer to her. "I know I am probably making a mess of this. I should have bought flowers, should have courted you properly. But I cannot keep pretending that you are just my housekeeper when you are so much more than that. You are the first person I think about when I wake up, and the last person I think about before I sleep. You make this house a home and my life worth living. I love you, Lydia. I do not care about your past. All I care about is being part of your future." Tears were streaming down Lydia's face, but for once they were tears of pure joy. "Your future starts with me," she whispered, repeating the words he had essentially just said. "If you will have me," Robert replied, reaching out to gently cup her cheek. "I know I am asking a lot. Staying with me means dealing with the town's prejudice, maybe for a long time. It means being the subject of gossip and judgment. But I promise you I will stand by your side through all of it. I will fight for you, Lydia, always." "I love you too," Lydia said, her voice breaking. "I have loved you for weeks now, but I never thought that you could feel the same way about someone like me." "Someone like you? You mean someone intelligent, capable, kind, and beautiful?" "Yes, it was very difficult for me to fall in love with all that," Robert said with a crooked smile. Lydia laughed through her tears. "You really think I am beautiful? I think you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." He brushed away her tears with his thumb. "May I kiss you?" In answer, Lydia rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened into something that left them both breathless. Robert's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Lydia felt like she was finally home. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling like fools. "We should probably talk about what just happened with the council," Lydia said reluctantly. "We should probably not," Robert countered. "We should probably go inside, let me kiss you some more, and deal with the consequences tomorrow." "That is a terrible plan." "Do you have a better one?" Lydia pretended to think about it. "No, I really do not." Robert laughed and swept her up in his arms, carrying her toward the house as she squealed in surprise. "Then my plan it is." The next morning brought a new set of challenges. When Robert and Lydia went into town together, now openly acknowledged as a courting couple, the reaction was even more hostile than before. Women clutched their husbands' arms and steered them away. Shopkeepers suddenly became very interested in their inventory rather than serving them. Even Reverend Phillips, who had been kind to Lydia initially, looked uncomfortable when they entered his church on Sunday morning. But there were also unexpected allies. Sarah Mitchell from the livery stable greeted them warmly and sat with them during the service, ignoring her father's disapproving glare. A few of the ranchers who did business with Robert made a point of tipping their hats to Lydia and asking after her health. And one elderly woman, Mrs. Abigail Harper, cornered them after church with fire in her eyes. "My late husband worked in a saloon as a card dealer before we married," she announced loudly enough for several eavesdropping parishioners to hear. "It was honest work, and it fed his family during hard times." Anyone who judges another person for doing what they must to survive has forgotten the teachings of Christ. You hold your head high, Miss Nelson. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Thank you, Mrs. Harper, Lydia managed, her voice thick with emotion. And you, young man, Mrs. Harper turned to Robert. You are a credit to your father's memory. He would be proud to see you standing up for what is right. As they walked back to the wagon, Lydia felt lighter than she had in days. She was wonderful. She is a force of nature, Robert agreed. My father used to say that Abigail Harper could talk sense into a fence post if she set her mind to it. Do you think things will get better? With the town, I mean. Robert helped her into the wagon before climbing up beside her. I think it does not matter. I have you, I have the ranch, I have a few good friends. That is all I need. The rest of the town can come around in their own time or not at all. But as it turned out, the town had more tricks up its sleeve. 2 days later, Robert received a letter from the bank informing him that his loan for purchasing new breeding stock had been denied. The week after that, the feed supplier suddenly refused to deliver to the ranch, claiming they were overextended. And Horace Whitman at the general store began charging them prices significantly higher than what he charged other customers. Robert took each setback with grim determination, finding alternative suppliers even if it meant traveling farther and paying more. But Lydia could see the strain it was putting on him, both financially and emotionally. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said one evening as they reviewed the accounts together. They are trying to ruin you because of me. They are trying to ruin me because they are small-minded bullies, Robert corrected. But they will not succeed. The Diamond D Ranch has been here for 3 generations and it will outlast all of them. But at what cost? Robert, your savings are dwindling. At this rate, you will be in serious trouble by spring. Then we will figure something out. He reached across the desk and took her hand. I am not giving you up, Lydia. Not for money, not for the town's approval, not for anything. We will get through this together. Lydia squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his certainty. I do not deserve you. You deserve the world. I am just doing my best to give it to you. The situation reached a crisis point in early December. Robert returned from attempting to sell several horses in Prescott, only to discover that word of his relationship with Lydia had spread throughout the territory. 3 potential sales had fallen through, and the buyers had been blunt about their reasons. They do not want to be associated with me, Robert said flatly, slumping in his chair at the kitchen table. One of them actually said that buying a Diamond D horse would be like endorsing immorality. Lydia felt sick. This has to stop. I cannot watch them destroy everything you have worked for. What are you suggesting? Maybe if I left, just for a while, things would calm down. I could go to California or Colorado, somewhere far enough away that the association would not hurt you anymore. Robert's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. No, absolutely not. But I said no, Lydia. Do you think I care more about money than I care about you? Do you think I would trade our future together for the approval of people whose opinions mean nothing to me? I think you are being stubborn and noble, and it is going to cost you everything. You are everything. Robert stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. My God, woman, do you still not understand? This ranch is just buildings and land. It does not keep me warm at night. It does not make me laugh. It does not make me want to be a better man. You do all of that. You are what matters, Lydia. You are what I am fighting for. Even if we lose the ranch, even then. We will start over somewhere else if we have to. We will find a place where people judge us by who we are, not where we came from. Lydia crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, feeling the tension in his body gradually ease as he held her close. How did I get so lucky to find you? She whispered against his chest. I ask myself the same thing every day. Robert pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We are going to be all right, Lydia. I promise you." But keeping that promise proved more difficult than either of them anticipated. December brought unseasonably cold weather and an early snowstorm that damaged one of the barns. Repairs cost money they could not spare. Then one of Robert's best mares came down with an illness that required expensive veterinary care. The bills kept mounting while their income dwindled to almost nothing. Robert sold off some of his personal possessions, including a gold watch that had belonged to his grandfather, to keep the ranch afloat. He took on odd jobs himself, doing work usually reserved for his ranch hands, to save on wages. He and Lydia ate simple meals and wore their clothes until they were nearly threadbare. Through it all, their love only grew stronger. Adversity had a way of revealing true character, and what Lydia saw in Robert made her love him more with each passing day. He never complained, never blamed her, never showed anything but determination to build a life together against all odds. For her part, Lydia did everything she could to help. She economized wherever possible, finding ways to stretch every dollar. She took in mending from Sarah Mitchell and a few other sympathetic townspeople, working late into the night to earn a few extra coins. She even started baking bread and pies to sell, her reputation as a cook overcoming some people's moral objections when it came to good food. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside and the house decorated with pine boughs and holly berries that Lydia had gathered, Robert presented her with a small wrapped package. "We agreed no gifts," Lydia protested. "We cannot afford it. Open it anyway." Inside was a simple gold ring set with a small but beautiful sapphire. Lydia gasped. "It was my mother's," Robert explained. "My father gave it to her when they married. I know times are hard right now, and I know we cannot afford a fancy wedding or even a preacher's fee at the moment. But I want you to have this as a promise. When things get better, and they will get better, I am going to marry you proper. I am going to stand up in that church and tell the whole town that you are mine and I am yours, and anyone who does not like it can go hang." "Oh, Robert." Lydia threw her arms around his neck, tears flowing freely. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. I do not care if it is in a church or a barn or in the middle of the desert. I just want to be your wife." Robert slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache with love. "We are going to make it through this," he promised. "You and me against the world. You and me against the world," Lydia echoed. The new year brought a surprising turn of events. In January, a man arrived at the ranch driving an expensive carriage and wearing clothes that marked him as someone of means. He introduced himself as Marcus Pritchard, a horse breeder from San Francisco. "I heard about your operation from a colleague," Pritchard explained as Robert showed him around the property. He said the Diamond D Ranch produced some of the finest working horses in the territory. "I am looking to upgrade my stock, and I am willing to pay top dollar for quality animals." Robert, though cautious after months of disappointments, showed Pritchard his best horses. The man's eyes lit up with genuine appreciation. "These are magnificent specimens," Pritchard said. "Strong, well-trained, perfect temperaments. I would like to purchase 8 of them if you are willing to sell." 8. Robert could barely believe his ears. That would be the largest sale he had made in over a year. "Yes, and if these work out as well as I expect, I will be back for more in the spring. I might even be interested in a long-term partnership if you are open to it." As they negotiated the terms of the sale, Lydia prepared refreshments in the house. When Pritchard came inside to review the paperwork, he greeted her warmly. "You must be Miss Nelson. My colleague mentioned you as well." He said Mr. Dalton's housekeeper had a head for business and figures that put most accountants to shame. "Your colleague is too kind," Lydia replied, pouring coffee. "Nonsense. These accounts are immaculate." Pritchard gestured to the ledgers spread across the desk. "You have documented everything perfectly. I wish my own bookkeeper was half as thorough." Over the next hour, as they finalized the sale, Pritchard asked several questions about the ranch's management. Lydia found herself answering many of them, explaining the system she had implemented for tracking breeding lines, managing expenses, and projecting future costs. "Remarkable," Pritchard said when they had finished. "Mr. Dalton, you are a lucky man to have such a capable partner." "I am indeed," Robert agreed, his eyes on Lydia. After Pritchard left with a promise to return with payment and horse trailers within the week, Robert picked Lydia up and spun her around the kitchen, both of them laughing. "We did it," he exclaimed. "That sale will cover our debts and give us enough cushion to make it through to spring. And the possibility of a partnership could mean steady income," Lydia added, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Robert, this could be the breakthrough we needed. It is all because of you." "Your reputation for quality work reached San Francisco, Lydia. That is why he came. He came because of your horses. He stayed because of your business acumen." Robert set her down but kept his arms around her. "We make a good team, you and I." "The best team," Lydia agreed, rising on her toes to kiss him. True to his word, Pritchard returned with payment and excellent references to other potential buyers in California. Over the following months, word spread that the Diamond D Ranch was back in business and thriving. Orders started coming in from ranchers and breeders throughout the West, who cared more about the quality of the horses than the moral standings of the people breeding them. By spring, the ranch was more prosperous than it had been in years. Robert hired back his full crew of ranch hands and began making improvements that had been delayed during the lean months. He and Lydia worked side by side, her managing the business end while he focused on the horses, and their partnership was seamless. But the town of Kingman remained largely hostile. A few more people had begun to thaw toward them, especially once it became clear that the ranch was not going to fail. But the majority still crossed the street to avoid them, still whispered behind their hands, still treated Lydia like a stain on their respectable community. It was Abigail Harper who finally took matters into her own hands. The elderly woman organized a tea at her home and invited every prominent woman in town. When they arrived, they found Lydia Nelson sitting in the place of honor beside Mrs. Harper. "Good afternoon, ladies, Mrs. Harper announced once everyone had gathered in her parlor, most of them looking uncomfortable at Lydia's presence. "I have invited you here today to discuss something that has been troubling me greatly. Our treatment of Miss Nelson has been shameful, and it reflects poorly on all of us." "Really, Abigail," one of the women protested, "we are only trying to maintain certain standards." "Standards, or sanctimony," Mrs. Harper's eyes flashed. "Miss Nelson came to our town seeking an honest living. She has worked hard, caused no trouble, and by all accounts has helped Robert Dalton turn his struggling ranch into a thriving business. Yet we have treated her like a leper because of choices she made to survive circumstances beyond her control. Is that the Christian charity we claim to practice?" "Her past," another woman began. "Her past is her own business," Mrs. Harper interrupted. "And I would remind you all that we each have things in our histories that would not bear close scrutiny. Susan, your father made his fortune selling rotgut whiskey to minors. Margaret, your uncle was a notorious gambler. Elizabeth, your brother spent 2 years in prison for horse theft before turning his life around. Yet you are all accepted members of society because your indiscretions, or those of your families are conveniently forgotten. Why do we not extend the same courtesy to Miss Nelson? The room fell silent. Lydia sat with her back straight and her head high, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Miss Nelson, Mrs. Harper continued, turning to her. Would you be so kind as to tell these ladies what you have been doing at the Diamond D Ranch? Lydia took a deep breath. I keep the house, manage the accounts, handle correspondence with buyers, maintain the breeding records, and assist with business negotiations. I also do all the cooking. And from what I understand, you have increased the ranch's profitability by 30% through your management, Mrs. Harper added. You have established business relationships with buyers as far away as California and Colorado. You have implemented systems that other ranches are now trying to emulate. In short, you have done more to boost our local economy than anyone in this room, yet we have repaid your contributions with scorn and judgment. Shame on us. Mrs. Harper's words hung in the air. Several of the women looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact, but others, including Sarah Mitchell's mother, nodded slowly. Abigail is right, Mrs. Mitchell said quietly. We have been unkind and unfair. Miss Nelson, I apologize for my part in making you feel unwelcome. As do I, added another woman and then another. Not everyone apologized. Some women left the tea early, their opinions unchanged. But others stayed, asking Lydia polite questions about the ranch, about her life, about her plans. By the time the gathering ended, Lydia felt a cautious hope that perhaps, finally, she might find acceptance in Kingman. The shift in attitude was gradual but real. More shopkeepers began treating Lydia with courtesy. Women nodded to her on the street. The pastor's wife invited her to join the church quilting circle. It was not universal acceptance, but it was progress. Robert noticed the change immediately. You look happy, he observed one evening in early summer as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. I am happy, Lydia replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. For the first time in my life, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Then it is time, Robert said, pulling away slightly so he could look at her face. Time for what? Time to make good on my promise. He stood and pulled her to her feet. Lydia Nelson, I love you more than life itself. You have brought joy and purpose to my days and hope to my future. I want to marry you, not someday in the distant future, but soon. This summer, if you are willing. I want the whole world to know that you are mine and I am yours. Will you marry me? You already asked me that, Lydia said, laughing through sudden tears. On Christmas Eve, remember? That was different. That was a promise for someday. This is an actual proposal with an actual wedding date in mind, so I am asking again, properly this time. Will you marry me, Lydia? Will you be my wife? Yes, Lydia said, pulling him down for a kiss. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married on a brilliant Saturday in late July, in the small church where Reverend Phillips performed the ceremony. The congregation was not full, but there were enough friendly faces that Lydia felt surrounded by love rather than judgment. Abigail Harper sat in the front row, beaming like a proud mother. Sarah Mitchell served as Lydia's attendant, and several of Robert's fellow ranchers stood witness. Lydia wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with wildflowers woven into her hair. Robert wore his best suit, looking so handsome that Lydia felt her breath catch when she saw him waiting for her at the altar. As they spoke their vows, Lydia thought about how far she had come. Less than a year ago, she had arrived in Kingman with nothing but a carpetbag and a desperate hope for a fresh start. She had been rejected, judged, cast out by people who knew nothing about her except rumors of her past. But then Robert had said those words that changed everything. Your future starts with me. And he had been right. Her future had started with him, with his kindness and faith in her, with his unwavering support and love. Together, they had weathered the storm of public opinion, financial hardship, and personal trials. They had built something real and lasting, a partnership based on respect, trust, and a love that had only grown stronger through adversity. When Reverend Phillips announced them as husband and wife, Robert kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance sighed. Then they walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next as a united front. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up under the open sky and food prepared by Lydia and several of the women who had become her friends. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy. Even some of the townspeople who had been most hostile showed up, perhaps recognizing that the tide had turned and they were on the wrong side of history. As the sun set and the celebration continued, Robert pulled Lydia away from the crowd for a private moment. "Happy?" he asked, his arms around her waist. "Deliriously," Lydia replied. "I never imagined I could have a day like this, a life like this. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Thank you for being brave enough to stay when everyone told you to leave. Thank you for fighting for us." Robert brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I love you, Mrs. Dalton. I love you too, Mr. Dalton." The first years of their marriage were filled with joy and hard work. The ranch continued to prosper, and Lydia's business acumen became legendary throughout the territory. Other ranchers sought her advice on managing their operations, and she found herself consulting for several nearby spreads. In the spring of 1880, Lydia discovered she was pregnant. Robert was overjoyed, immediately becoming protective and doting to an almost comical degree. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Lydia protested when he tried to forbid her from helping with the accounts. "I know that. I also know that you have a tendency to work too hard. Let me take care of you for once. You always take care of me. Then let me take care of you more." Robert placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby, Lydia. Our baby. I am allowed to be excited and overprotective." Their son was born in November, a healthy boy with Robert's dark hair and Lydia's blue eyes. They named him Thomas, after Robert's father, and from the moment he entered the world, it was clear he had his parents' strong will and determination. Motherhood transformed Lydia in ways she had not expected. Holding her son in her arms, she felt a fierce love that eclipsed everything she had experienced before. This child would never know hunger or desperation. He would never be judged for circumstances beyond his control. He would grow up in a home filled with love, on land his family owned, surrounded by people who respected and valued him. The town of Kingman had fully accepted Lydia by this time. She was invited to all the social functions. Her opinion was sought on community matters, and younger women often came to her for advice on managing household finances. The scandal of her past had faded into irrelevance, replaced by her reputation as a successful businesswoman, a devoted wife, and a pillar of the community. 2 years after Thomas was born, Lydia gave birth to twin girls, Ruth and Grace. The ranch house rang with the sounds of children's laughter, and Robert proved to be as devoted a father as he was a husband. He taught Thomas to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and he was endlessly patient with the twins' endless questions and boundless energy. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure this is real," Lydia confessed one evening as they sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard. "Everything I have now, everything we have built together, it feels like a dream." "It is real," Robert assured her, taking her hand. "And we earned it, every bit of it. Do you ever regret it, standing by me when it cost you so much?" "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Lydia," You and our children, this life we have made together, it is all I ever wanted." As the years passed, the Diamond D Ranch became one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the territory. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Robert and Lydia were among the community leaders invited to the celebrations. They stood side by side, older now but still deeply in love, as they watched the flag of the new state rise for the first time. Their children grew into fine adults. Thomas took over much of the ranch management, proving to have his mother's head for business and his father's skill with horses. The twins both married well, Ruth to a doctor and Grace to a lawyer, and gave Lydia and Robert a growing number of grandchildren to spoil. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Robert surprised Lydia with a trip back to St. Louis. They stood outside the building where the saloon had once stood, now replaced by a respectable hotel. "Why did you want to come here?" Lydia asked, puzzled by the choice. "Because this is where your story began," Robert replied. The story of the woman who survived impossible circumstances and came out stronger. "I wanted to stand here and thank the universe for the path that led you to me." Lydia felt tears prickling her eyes. "I was so lost back then. I thought my life was over, that I would never be anything more than what circumstances had forced me to become. But you were wrong. You became so much more. You became my wife, the mother of my children, a successful businesswoman, a respected member of the community. You became exactly who you were always meant to be." "No," Lydia corrected gently. "I became who I was always meant to be with you beside me. You saw me, Robert, when no one else could. You saw past the scandal and the judgment to the person I really was. You gave me a chance when the whole world said I did not deserve one. My future really did start with you." "And mine with you," Robert replied, pulling her close. "I was just existing before you came along. You taught me what it means to truly live." They returned to Kingman and the ranch they loved, continuing to build the legacy they would pass on to future generations. Every success they achieved, every hardship they overcame, they faced together as partners in every sense of the word. In the late autumn of 1920, Robert and Lydia celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch house, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, was filled with noise and laughter and love. As the party wound down and family members began departing for their own homes, Robert and Lydia once again found themselves on the porch where they had spent so many evenings together. 42 years, Lydia mused, her hand in Robert's. Where did the time go? Into building something beautiful, Robert replied. He was 70 now, his hair silver and his face lined with age, but his eyes still held the same warmth and love they had shown the day they met. "No regrets, not a single one. Only that I did not meet you sooner." Robert squeezed her hand gently. "But I suppose we met exactly when we were supposed to. Everything happened the way it needed to happen to bring us together." "The town rejected my past," Lydia said softly, echoing the words she had thought so many times over the years. "And I said your future starts with me," Robert finished, the words that had changed both their lives forever. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their love story all those years ago. The desert night was cool and clear, filled with the familiar sounds of the ranch they had built together. Inside the house, they could hear Thomas giving instructions to the ranch hands for the next day's work, his voice carrying the same authority and fairness his father had always shown. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of horses neighing, descendants of the same bloodlines Robert's grandfather had started decades ago. This was their legacy, Lydia thought. Not just the land or the horses or the successful business, but the family they had created, the love they had nurtured, the example they had set of standing firm in the face of judgment and building a life based on respect, trust, and unwavering devotion. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been 42 years ago. "I love you too," Robert replied. "Always have, always will." As they sat together watching the stars wheel overhead, Lydia felt a profound sense of contentment. The girl who had arrived in Kingman with nothing but a carpet bag and a tarnished reputation seemed like someone from another lifetime. In a way, she was. That desperate, frightened woman had been reborn into someone stronger, someone capable of weathering any storm as long as she had Robert by her side. The town that had once rejected her had become her home. The man who had offered her a future had become her everything. And the love story that had started with such unlikely circumstances had blossomed into something that would endure for generations. Their story was proof that the past did not have to dictate the future, that love could overcome prejudice, and that sometimes the most beautiful things in life grew from the most challenging circumstances. It was a story of redemption and hope, of standing firm in your convictions even when the whole world stood against you, of finding strength in partnership and joy in commitment. As the night deepened and the desert air grew cooler, Robert stood and offered Lydia his hand, just as he had done countless times before. "Shall we go inside, Mrs. Dalton?" "Lead the way, Mr. Dalton." Hand in hand, they walked into the house they had made a home, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. The photographs lining the walls told the story of their journey. Their wedding day, the births of their children, family gatherings and celebrations, quiet moments and grand occasions. Each image was a testament to their love, their resilience, and their refusal to let the judgment of others define their worth. The years continued to pass in peaceful contentment. Robert and Lydia grew old together, their love deepening with each passing season. They watched their grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, expanding the Diamond D legacy even further. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, and he instilled in his own children the same values his parents had taught him: hard work, integrity, compassion, and the importance of judging people by their character rather than their circumstances. On a warm spring morning in 1925, Lydia woke to find Robert had passed peacefully in his sleep. He was 75 years old and had lived a full, rich life surrounded by love. The grief was crushing, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe. For the first time in nearly half a century, Lydia felt truly alone. The entire community turned out for Robert's funeral. Ranchers came from across the state to pay their respects. Townspeople who had once scorned Lydia now offered their heartfelt condolences. The church was packed with people whose lives Robert had touched through his fairness, his kindness, and his unwavering integrity. As Lydia stood at his graveside, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, she thought about the words he had spoken to her all those years ago. "Your future starts with me." He had given her more than just a job and a place to live. He had given her dignity, love, purpose, and a family. He had shown her what it meant to be truly valued, to be seen for who she was rather than judged for who she had been. Now he was gone, but his legacy lived on in every person he had touched, in every child and grandchild who carried his values forward, in every horse bearing the Diamond D brand, in every acre of land they had worked together to maintain and improve. Lydia lived for another 12 years after Robert's passing, continuing to be an active presence in her children's and grandchildren's lives. She never remarried, often saying that she had already experienced the great love of her life and needed no other. She remained sharp and active until the very end, still consulting on business matters and sharing stories of the old days with anyone who would listen. When Lydia Nelson Dalton passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1937 at the age of 82, she left behind a legacy that extended far beyond the successful ranch and thriving family. She had proven that people could change their circumstances, that the past did not have to determine the future, and that love and perseverance could overcome even the harshest judgment. The Diamond D Ranch remained in the family for generations to come, each successive owner adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation laid by Robert and Lydia. The tale of the woman rejected by the town and the cowboy who offered her a future became a cherished family legend, passed down through the years as an example of the power of love, faith, and second chances. In the ranch house that Robert had built and Lydia had made a home, descendants gathered for holidays and celebrations, their laughter echoing through rooms where so much history had been made. The photographs on the walls multiplied over the years, but the original wedding portrait of Robert and Lydia always held the place of honor above the fireplace, a reminder of where it all began. Visitors to Kingman could still see the Diamond D Ranch from the main road, its neat fences and well-maintained buildings, a testament to careful stewardship spanning more than a century. Though the original founders had long since passed, their spirit lived on in every aspect of the operation, in the quality of the horses, the integrity of the business dealings, and the warmth with which visitors were welcomed. The story of Robert and Lydia became more than just family history. It became a part of the town's identity, a reminder that Kingman had not always lived up to its ideals, but had learned and grown from its mistakes. The church where they married added a plaque commemorating their wedding, and the Historical Society included their story in the museum as an example of frontier courage and the evolution of social attitudes. Young couples starting their lives together often visited the cemetery where Robert and Lydia were buried side by side, their shared headstone bearing a simple inscription. Their future started together, and their love endures forever. It became a tradition for newlyweds to leave flowers at the grave, asking for the same kind of enduring love and partnership that had sustained Robert and Lydia through nearly 5 decades together. The values they had exemplified, the stand they had taken against prejudice and judgment, the life they had built through sheer determination and mutual devotion, continued to inspire long after they were gone. Their story proved that love could indeed conquer all, that integrity and character mattered more than social standing, and that the most beautiful futures often grew from the most unlikely beginnings. In the end, Robert and Lydia's legacy was not measured in acres or dollars, or even in the number of descendants they left behind. It was measured in the example they set, the love they shared, and the proof they provided that every person deserves a second chance. That judgment should be reserved for actions rather than circumstances, and that true love sees past superficial concerns to the heart of what really matters. The cowboy had said her future started with him, and he had been absolutely right. But what he perhaps had not realized at the time was that his future had started with her too. They had saved each other, supported each other, and built something together that neither could have achieved alone. Theirs was a true partnership in every sense, a meeting of equals who recognized in each other the strength, courage, and integrity that would sustain them through anything life threw their way. And so the story of Robert and Lydia became timeless, a tale told and retold to remind people that love is stronger than prejudice, that character matters more than reputation, and that every person, regardless of their past, deserves the chance to build a better future. It was a story of the Wild West at its finest, not because of gunfights or cattle drives or frontier adventures, but because of two people who refused to let society's judgments dictate their happiness, and who proved that the most powerful force in the world is the love between two people who truly see and value each other. Their future had indeed started together on that dusty day in 1878, when a desperate woman walked onto a ranch seeking work, and a fair-minded cowboy saw past her past to the person she could become. From that unlikely beginning had grown a love story for the ages, a testament to hope, redemption, and the transformative power of unconditional love and acceptance.